Someone on here described the Grenfell tragedy as nightmare fuel, and I couldn't agree more. Innocent families instructed to stay inside a burning building until they died. It was the 14th of June 2017 when a panicked call came in to emergency services. It had been a quiet evening for them in London up until that point, but just after midnight all hell would break loose. A malfunctioning fridge freezer on a 4th floor flat of the Grenfell Tower caused a fire to break out. Now this wasn't anything out of the ordinary for the emergency services. They were very used to appliances setting on fire and just being able to put them out pretty quickly. However, a recent refurbishment of the Grenfell Tower and the installation of dangerous cladding caused the entire building to literally be engulfed in flames in minutes. There is a massive deep dive on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation, on Apple and Spotify if you want all of the details of the Grenfell disaster. But if you want the summary, keep watching. Very quickly, things got out of hand, and due to that new cladding, the fire spread at a staggering rate. Fire was literally flying upwards, and suddenly white-hot flames could be seen engulfing the entire building. More and more frantic calls started pouring into emergency services, who just began getting really overwhelmed. And the videos of the tower, if you've seen them, you'll know exactly what I mean. It honestly looks like a UK 9/11. By 1:27 a.m, the fire reached the roof of the building, where many residents had gone to seek cover. Families and children, meanwhile, were waking up dazed and confused, wondering what the hell was going on. They were waking up, opening their doors and being met with thick black smoke. And the advice right from the get-go was there was a stay-put policy in place. Now, this was apparently standard protocol in these high-rise flats, these kind of concrete buildings. The fire service would tell residents to stay indoors to essentially prevent any mass panic, chaos, people getting stuck on the stairwell. The thinking was that the thick concrete walls should have been enough to contain a fire to one flat. It was absolutely not the case. Due to the combustible cladding, the fire clearly spread throughout the entire building. One firefighter, David, spoke of how a woman had bumped into him and asked him to help her daughter, little Jessica. She was just 12 years old. Now, he recalled how he'd initially gone up the building in the lift because this was before he realised how bad this fire was, and when the door opened, all he could see was just this thick black smoke. That's when it dawned on him just how horrific this fire was. And he never found Jessica and eventually realised she'd passed away. As the fire spread uncontrollably, the stay put advice was reversed. After 2:30 a.m, they started encouraging people to just get out of this burning building by any means necessary. It was obvious by now that this was a deadly fire, but there were still around 100 people inside at this point. Firefighters literally raced up and down the narrow stairwells trying to rescue people, dragging out unconscious and conscious people. Every time residents would try and escape from their flat, they just opened the door and they were just gagging at this toxic smoke. People were throwing their pets out of the window to try and save them. Some people got bed sheets tied together to make like a rope to scale the building. As people tried to make a run for safety, they were slipping over unconscious and deceased people in the stairwells. Now, the heroic firefighters did manage to save many residents. It's reported that around 220, give or take, managed to escape. But tragically, 72 lives were lost. Children died, disabled people were just stuck in this burning building. There was no plan in place to evacuate disabled people in case of emergency. To really just demonstrate how powerful this fire was, it took 2.5 days to totally put the fire out. But the devastation was far from over. The aftermath of this tragedy included lies, protests, and that iconic Stormzy 2018 Brits performance. If you know, you know. For a full deep dive into the tragedy, head over to The Bourne Investigation on Spotify and Apple.
After this 18-year-old died on live stream, someone recorded the footage and posted it to gore sites. Before his death became a viral internet controversy, Mateus Santos was just a teenager. The 18-year-old lived in Bossa Nova, Brazil, and spent majority of his time online under the name Morbid 2006. His YouTube channel was small, with fewer than 100 subscribers, and his content is exactly what you expect from a kid who loved gaming. He uploaded videos about games like Super Mario 64 64 in Castlevania, and he was even involved in the Friday Night Funkin' modding community. But behind the screen, he was hurting. Months before his death, Mateus frequently posted about feeling alone, worthless, and exhausted by life. Looking back at those posts now, it was clear he was carrying far more than most people realized. While other teenagers were planning for the future, Mateus was fighting his own mind. And then things became even worse. According to the members of the online communities he was involved in, Mateus eventually came into contact with the controversial internet figure known as Smitty Werbin. What happened after has become one of the most debated parts of this entire case. Many people believe Smitty Werbin deliberately took advantage of Mateus's fragile mental state. They claim he exposed the already depressed teenager to extremely disturbing shock and gore content while encouraging some of his darkest thoughts. Because most of their conversations happened online and behind anonymous accounts, what was exactly said isn't fully known. Then, on April 30th, 2025, the situation reached a heartbreaking end. Mateus started a live stream on his YouTube channel and took his own life during the broadcast. News of what happened spread quickly across social media. But what outraged people wasn't just the live stream itself, it was what happened afterwards. Smitty Werbin was accused of recording the live stream and posting it to gore websites, allowing strangers to watch and share the video. For many people, that crossed a line that should have never been crossed. Today, Mateus' story is a reminder that people behind our screens are real human beings. They're not usernames or content. They're real people living real lives, carrying real pain. Mental health isn't attention seeking, it isn't weakness, and it isn't something people can just get over. And if there's anything you can take from this tragedy, is that your mental health matters. Even when it feels like nobody sees you, your life still has value. This case today talked about some heavy topics, so I gotta give you a hug. Bring it in. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
31-year-old Melissa Mooney was found brutally murdered in her downtown Los Angeles apartment in what investigators are describing as a violent attack. As of today, October 27th, her killer is still on the loose. Melissa was a real estate agent and model who was also 2 months pregnant when her body was found in her apartment at the Sky at Bunker Hill complex on September 12th of this year. She stopped responding to texts and calls from family members in the days before she was found, which really concerned them. According to Melissa's mom, she ended up getting a hold of Melissa's phone records and called the last number that was dialed out on her phone. Since she couldn't get in touch with her daughter, she figured this was worth a shot and that this person may know something. But when this person answered, they explained that someone was actually just trying to sell them Melissa's phone for $100, and it wasn't Melissa. This prompted her family to go to Melissa's apartment on September 12th, and when they weren't allowed entry, they called the Los Angeles Police Department to come out and do a welfare check. When police arrived around 3:45 p.m. and opened her door, they found that Melissa's apartment was completely flooded with water, and unfortunately, they found her deceased inside. There was no evidence of forced entry, but her phone, laptop, dirty laundry, and her favorite purse were all missing from the scene. So far, the police have not revealed a cause of death for Melissa, not even to her family, but the medical examiner stated they are investigating this as homicidal violence. They also listed, quote, other significant conditions in their report. According to an interview involving Melissa's sister with News Nation, she and the rest of her family only got details surrounding her sister's murder from the mortuary, and the details they got were incredibly graphic. Melissa suffered from head trauma, 2 broken ankles, severe injuries to her hands and legs, and basically her entire body had been badly damaged. The mortuary even said that they had to, quote, put her back together again. Melissa's family had access to her apartment after the police were done collecting evidence, and they described a chilling scene. They said huge chunks of carpet had been ripped up and the fridge was gone, so whatever happened there was very traumatic. Right now, the family has basically no answers, and the police have not been communicating with them. Whoever killed Melissa is still out there, and her family is questioning what the LAPD even has as evidence. The police haven't mentioned anything about surveillance footage or if they even have a suspect. And with it being like a luxury apartment complex in downtown Los Angeles, I would imagine that they would have security footage, so why hasn't it been released? Like I mentioned earlier, Melissa was 2 months pregnant at the time of her death. She was really excited to be a mom, and according to the family, her boyfriend is extremely devastated and heartbroken. I've attached a GoFundMe for Melissa's family in my bio. Whatever is donated will go directly to helping them continue this fight and getting justice for Melissa. If you have any information at all, please contact the LAPD at 213-996-4150 Or you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-TIPS.
If you're not already familiar with the strange death of actress Natalie Wood, well, buckle up. For me, this case is proof of Hollywood cover-ups and maybe even psychics. If you're not familiar with Natalie Wood's work, she was a very famous actress back in her day, starring in films like Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. A very confusing part of this case is Natalie Wood, throughout her entire life, was very afraid of water. When she was a child, she saw a psychic who told her she would drown in dark water. Definitely affected her more as a child, but it definitely still affected her in adulthood. She never learned to swim and was kind of just iffy about being in water, especially alone and at night. The weekend that she passed away, she had plans to be on her yacht with her very famous actor husband, Robert Wagner. On the yacht that weekend was also the captain, Dennis Davern, who had worked with Natalie and her husband Robert for many years and considered himself a family friend. Natalie and Robert also invited actor Christopher Walken on their yacht that weekend because him and Natalie had just recently starred in a movie together. Throughout Natalie and Robert's marriage, jealousy was always a big issue, and reportedly at the time of her death, Robert was really suspicious over her relationship with co-star Christopher Walken. And apparently that weekend on the yacht, there was a lot of drinking and arguing going on between the married couple. The night that Natalie passed away, Robert said after some drinks, him and Christopher Walken got in a little bit of a heated debate over politics. Natalie was there, but she looked kind of bored, so she left to go to sleep, and when he went to go kiss her goodnight, she was gone. And her body wasn't found until early the next morning, about a mile away from the yacht. She had drowned in only her nightgown, her socks, and her jacket. The yacht's rubber dinghy was also found nearby Natalie. Robert had this very detailed theory about what he thought must have happened to Natalie. So in short, he thought that the rubber dinghy was banging up against the yacht. Natalie couldn't sleep, so she went out to go tighten the rope, slipped on some algae, hit her head, and drowned. And while this could maybe be possible, in my years of looking into true crime, when someone has a very detailed theory about what they think must have happened, it's usually a red flag. When Natalie was found, she had a couple bruises and scratches on her, and it was assumed that she had gotten them after she had already fallen in the water, and her cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. We already went over Robert's story that night, but the other two men that were on the yacht have a very different story of events. Instead of it being a political debate between Walken and Wagner, Christopher Walken said it was actually Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood that were fighting that night, but he believes that they had made up. But the captain, Dennis Davern, says that they did not make up that night and that actually Robert Wagner accused Christopher Walken of wanting to sleep with his wife. And when Robert Wagner came to tell the captain that his wife was missing, he said that Robert Wagner looked really sweaty and like he had been in a fight of some kind. Something important to note while we're talking about timelines is around midnight that night, a couple that was on a nearby ship said they heard a woman screaming for help. And then they heard a man reply back to her in a mocking tone, kind of like, "Okay, honey, we'll get you." So the couple that heard this assumed due to the man's tone that it wasn't serious. And the main theory in this case is that Natalie's husband, Robert, had something to do with her untimely death. And if that's true, and he was speaking into her in this mocking tone while she was drowning, and water was her biggest fear, that literally sends shivers up my spine. I mean, Natalie couldn't swim, and everyone that knew her said there would be no way she'd be messing around with the boat at night that close to the edge. This case gained so much traction online that the investigators actually decided to take a second look at it and reopen it in 2011. And then in 2012, Natalie Wood's cause of death was actually changed to drowning and other determined factors. And now it's actually believed that the bruises and scratches that they found on her were injuries she actually got before she went into the water. And in 2018, Natalie Wood's husband, Robert Wagner, was named as a person of interest for the first time ever in this case. And that's really where we're left with updates. I unfortunately had to leave a lot of information out of this video just for the sake of time. But if you're interested in this, I suggest looking into it because you guys can fall down the rabbit hole for so long. If you're already aware of the other information, drop it in the comments and we can keep discussing because I'm always in my comments.
There's a strange missing persons case happening right now out of Arizona, and we should talk about it. This is Chelsea Grimm. She went missing during a cross-country road trip from San Diego to Connecticut where she was traveling for a wedding. The timeline of events leading up to her disappearance is bizarre, and it's what makes this case so strange. On September 24th, Chelsea left her home in San Diego to head out for the wedding in Connecticut. She was traveling alone, but she did have her pet bearded dragon with her. On September 27th, just 3 days into the trip, she met up with a friend in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was at this point that she called her parents and said that the drive was actually taking longer than she thought, so she was just going to skip the wedding, maybe do a little bit of camping, and then head back home to San Diego. This was the last time that her parents heard from her, but this is where it gets confusing. Chelsea was actually spotted at a hotel in Seligman, Arizona that day after the phone call with her parents. According to a witness, she seemed disoriented and was trying to use euros instead of US currency. A day later, police responded to a report of a woman who was acting suspicious, and upon investigating, the officer found Chelsea in her car at a cemetery in Williams, Arizona. She was crying and she told him that she was working on a photography project about missing soldiers. She also told the officer that she was planning to camp in her car that night, so after he deemed her to be okay, he suggested that she go to a Love's truck stop to sleep in her car overnight. At this point, it's not known if she actually did that or not. On September 30th, a woodcutter reportedly saw Chelsea camping in her car near Ash Fork, Arizona, but she apparently seemed okay, so no call was made. By October 4th, Chelsea's parents officially reported her missing after not hearing from her. And just 1 day later, hunters found her white 2019 Ford Escape abandoned in the middle of a dirt road near Ash Fork. Both of the tires on the right side of the car were flat, and all of her personal belongings, including her pet bearded dragon, were missing from the car. The vehicle was found to be locked, and it appears that there were no obvious signs of a struggle. But it's now been a month since Chelsea was last seen or heard from. Her family has since hired a private investigator to find out what exactly happened to her. With the car being abandoned on a dirt road with 2 flat tires, and the fact that she was a woman traveling alone is really concerning. These are some photos of what she was last wearing, including a photo of her bearded dragon and a mask that she normally wears. Police across multiple states are now looking for Chelsea, and they're asking anyone with information to call the sheriff's office at 928-774-4523.
The only thing more baffling to me than missing persons cases are when that missing person then reappears over a decade later. She literally came back from the dead. She'd been declared legally dead years earlier. It was 2002 in Lititz in Pennsylvania. Brenda Heiss was a seemingly normal mother of 2 from the area who was working as an accountant. She had a son and a daughter aged 12 and 8. Now, on the day she vanished, everything seemed to be fairly normal. She put some food out to defrost later, and she took her kids to school. She'd been doing a good job of keeping the normal household routine together despite the fact that she was actually going through a divorce. It kind of seemed to everybody like her kids were keeping her going, keeping her in a normal routine. That's why it was so worrying when she all of a sudden just vanished. She never picked her kids up from school that day. She never even contacted anybody to say where she was. Now, obviously, due to her recent divorce, police started looking immediately into her ex, her husband. As bad as it sounds, they were wondering if he had killed her out of anger, revenge, or for financial gain. But her husband Lee seemed just as confused as everybody else, to be fair, and just as eager to get her home. Months and months went by with absolutely no sign of the missing mother. There was also no sign of foul play, no reason to believe any harm had come to her. Years and years rumbled on, and eventually Lee actually went to court to have her declared legally dead. He was then obviously able to remarry if he wanted to. He was able to claim on her life insurance policy too. Now, this again did kind of raise some eyebrows in the community. Neighbours did feel kind of suspicious of him about this, but really nobody had any proof. And sadly, her children had come to terms with the fact that their mum wasn't coming home. That was until 11 years later. Bear in mind, her family really had moved on at this point. Her daughter Morgan was 19 years old. She was attending college. She'd had a whole chunk of her childhood without a mum, when all of a sudden, into a police station in Florida, walked Brenda. By this point, it was April 2013. So many years had gone by. She told police officers that she was a missing woman, and at first they were a little bit confused, but she gave them all her details. She then revealed her absolutely unbelievable story to authorities. She said the day that she vanished, she did so of her own accord. She'd suddenly randomly decided on the spur of the moment to join a bunch of hitchhikers who were homeless, who were moving to Florida. She decided to abandon her children to sleep on the streets and sometimes even scavenge in bins for food. She would sit on the street corners and beg for money. She'd obviously not told anyone her real name, and she'd just been sharing tents with strangers and sleeping rough. And the only reason she wanted to hand herself in was that she was tired of being homeless. And when her children found out, they were understandably pretty upset and angry and reluctant to reunite with her. And honestly, I don't know how I would deal with that. I don't know how I would process that information. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think you would ever be able to forgive your mum for doing that?
They were caught making empanadas out of humans. In Brazil, Jorge Negromonte lived with his wife Isabel and his mistress Bruna. To the outside world, they seemed like an odd but harmless trio. They were polite, friendly, and struggling to make ends meet. But no one really knew what was going on inside of their home. Inside of that home, they were cleansing the world by getting rid of the women they considered impure. This trio would target young women, specifically ones that were struggling financially. They would put out a job ad looking for a nanny, offering decent pay in a stable home, and once these women would get the job, they would think that they finally found a decent job, but they had no idea that they were walking into a death trap. Once those women would make it inside of the home, the trio would waste no time. The woman would be attacked, restrained, and brutally unalived. The most horrifying part was each woman's flesh would be carved out and used as food. The trio believed that consuming their victims was part of a twisted purification ritual. They even forced their own daughter to take part in eating these meals. These women were turned into empanadas and sold to neighbors and including children. For years, they got away with it, and it seemed like they were never going to get caught. But in 2012, one of their victims, named Jessica, had family members that weren't going to let her disappearance go unnoticed. Her family was pushing for answers, and police traced Jessica's last known location, and that was Jorge's house. When officers arrived to the home, they went to the backyard and found Jessica and other women buried. Inside of the home, they found journals detailing everything that had happened. In 2014, the trio were convicted. Jorge got a sentence of 24 years, but later on it went up to 71 years with more evidence coming out, and Isabel and Bruna got similar sentences. Sadly, these victims never got to fight back, and their families never got to say goodbye to them. He violently shook and tortured his 4-month-old baby because she wouldn't stop crying. By November of 2024, Andrew Kamer and his fiancée Daniel Rude were caring for 4-month-old twin girls, Evelyn and her sister. The babies had already faced challenges from the very beginning. They were born 4 weeks premature and suffered from ongoing health issues that required constant attention and care. Now, I'm not going to pretend that raising premature twins is easy, because it's not. You're exhausted, you're stressed out, and running on little to no sleep. But investigators believe Andrew wasn't handling that stress well at all. As they dug into his personal life, they found he had a serious problem controlling his anger. In fact, there was a door inside the home that was punched full of holes during previous outbursts. Then, on November 6th, everything came to a horrifying end. That day, Evelyn wouldn't stop crying, and Andrew snapped. Instead of walking away or finding a way to calm down, he took his frustrations out on his daughter. Andrew violently shook 4-month-old Evelyn, causing catastrophic injuries throughout her tiny body. Medical examinations later revealed severe brain trauma, bleeding around her spinal cord, fractured ribs, and a liver laceration that was so severe that it caused fatal internal bleeding. There was also trauma to her throat. After the attack, Andrew called 911. He claimed Evelyn had stopped breathing after falling face first from a changing table. He repeated the story to first responders and medical staff, but doctors quickly realized that something wasn't adding up. When the autopsy was done, it completely dismantles Andrew's explanation. Evelyn's injuries were way too severe to be caused by a simple fall. It was concluded that Andrew caused these injuries because of his violent temper. When investigators examined the surviving twin sister, they discovered multiple healing rib fractures. This told investigators that this wasn't just a one-time thing, but a pattern of abuse. And they didn't just focus on Andrew. In December of 2024, Evelyn's mother, Danielle, was charged charged after she failed to protect her daughters and report the abuse taking place inside the home. Andrew was initially charged with aggravated murder and murder, but in July of 2025, he accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Danielle also accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to child endangering charges, while her other charges were dropped. Then on September 16, 2025, both parents learned their fate. Andrew Kamer was sentenced to 19 to 24 years and a half for the abuse and death of baby Evelyn. Danielle Rude was sentenced to at least 5 years in prison for failing to protect her children. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
I believe the police should take domestic violence way more seriously because restraining orders do not do anything. And because of this beautiful mother and her 2-year-old daughter were brutally murdered. This is Chrissy Chambers. She lives in Barking, England, and she was described as being very funny and friendly, and she also competed in beauty contests. And when she was 19 years old, she met Ian, and they had 2 kids together, a daughter named Chelsea and a son named Guy. So the family was struggling. They were living in their vehicle and basically homeless. So they decided to split up in 2003. So Ian took their son Guy, while Chrissy took their daughter Chelsea. But then eventually Chrissy met a man, 45-year-old David Oates. He is 13 years older than her, and he is a bouncer at a nightclub. So David moves in with Chrissy, and her friends can see he's a little bit controlling. He wanted Chrissy's daughter Chelsea to start calling him dad, and she did not want to do this. But she eventually gave in and started calling him dad. And he would get violent. He would get mad over the littlest things. February 2008, Chrissy is 34 years old and she finds out she is pregnant, and she is absolutely ecstatic about this new baby. And Chelsea is so excited to be a big sister. Now Guy, on the other hand, he was happy that he was going to have a sibling, but he didn't like that David was going to have an extra foot in the door. Now David knows how to fight, and when he was younger, he got in a lot of trouble with the police, and he was previously married, and he used to abuse his ex-wife. And one day, him and Chrissy got into an argument, and Chelsea was trying to get in the middle saying, don't hurt my mom or don't yell at my mom. So he ends up throwing a can of beans at her, and it hits her right in the eye. And she couldn't go to school for about a month because her eye was so swollen. Now Chrissy ended up meeting David's ex-wife, and she could tell that Chrissy was nervous. And she told her, you've got to get out of this relationship before he really hurts you. But it's not as easy as it seems. And then when Guy was 9 years old and Chelsea was 8, they had witnessed David take their mother's hair and just bash her head into the banister. But because they were so young, there was nothing they could really do. And Chrissy is just saying, stop, please stop. And he was just really abusing her. By October of 2008, Chrissy gives birth to their daughter Shania, and David was a very devoting father. But by 2011, Chrissy had had enough of David's abuse. So they finally split up after 6 years, and he eventually moved out. Now Chrissy wanted to have full custody of their daughter Shania, and David had told her, I will kill all of you. Now I believe the police were called to their home multiple times when they were together for DV, and eventually Chrissy filed a restraining order where David could not be within 100 meters of her. And in June, he had sent her over 100 threatening text messages, and Chrissy is just terrified for her life. Now, Chrissy still allowed David to see their daughter Shania, and so she dropped her off one day, and he said to Chrissy, if I can't have you, no one else can, and Shania will never call anyone else dad, ever. So the night before Chrissy was supposed to go to court about custody of Shania, her daughter Chelsea, and Shania are all sleeping in the same room when David broke into the house with a big duffel bag. So David ends up slapping Chrissy in the face to wake her up. And in this duffel bag, he's got an axe, multiple knives, he's got a drill, and he also has a shotgun. So he gets that shotgun out and he's threatening to murder Chelsea and also his own daughter. And then he was threatening to take his own life. And he said, if I hear one siren, I will shoot all of you. So Chelsea's only 8 to 10 years old at this time. And of course she's terrified and she's crying and she's really, really scared. And David's really annoyed that she's crying. So he ends up taking Chrissy downstairs. But Chelsea can overhear their conversation. And David is explaining to Chrissy on how she's going to die. And he begins torturing her. He cuts her ear off, he's beating her, he ends up cutting her hair, and eventually little Shania wakes up, and I believe she doesn't know what's going on. But then Chelsea takes her little sister into the bedroom and she falls asleep. Now Chrissy comes back upstairs to tell Chelsea to stop crying, and all she's wearing is underwear. And she tells her daughter Chelsea, "You've got to get out of here." Now Chelsea did not want to leave her mom, and she said, "Don't worry about me, just get out of here." So she was on the second floor, so Chelsea was able to jump out the window and run down the street a few doors down to her father's house, where her brother is as well too. So Chelsea was able to make it to her dad's house and explain what is going on, but she was afraid for him to call the police because he said he was going to murder all of them if they heard one siren. But he decides, we've got to call the police. So the police arrive on the scene and they're trying to talk to David to get him to come out, and he won't. So they eventually make their way in, and what they find is a horrific scene. Chrissy had been shot and killed in the stomach, and then 2-year-old Shania had been shot at point-blank range with a shotgun. And then David attempted to take his own life, but he did end up surviving after he was taken to the hospital. Now what's crazy is that David pled not guilty, and he's putting all of the blame on Chrissy. He's saying that him and Chrissy got into an argument and they're wrestling with that firearm, and it accidentally goes off and then it hits little Shania. So he said he had to murder Chrissy because of what she had done to little Shania. But thanks to Chelsea, she was so brave because she was still so young at this time, was able to testify on what actually happened. But David was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. But unfortunately, he only served 1 year because he passed away in 2013 behind bars from cancer. Now, this could have been prevented. If the police would have taken Chrissy seriously, she would still be alive today, and also little Shania. So both of Chrissy's kids got compensation from the police department because of their negligence, because they had plenty of time and opportunity to arrest David because of the DV. Only a monster would be able to raise a firearm, point it at their 2-year-old daughter's face, and then pull the trigger. I will never understand it, and the police definitely failed Chrissy and Shania. They should still be here with us today. Chrissy went to the police. The police have been to their home multiple times for DV. They had plenty of opportunity to arrest him, and they never did. All she had was a piece of paper saying he could not be within 100 meters of her. It did absolutely nothing. Now, every time I see a woman in an abusive relationship, I'm thinking to myself, why doesn't she just leave? It's really not as easy as it seems. Now, I can't speak because I've never been in an abusive relationship, but it's really not as easy as it seems. And Chrissy did do that. She got out of the relationship and she was trying to protect her daughter because she knew how dangerous David was. And what did it end up happening in the end? Even though she did the right thing and got out to protect her children, it ended up costing her life and her precious 2-year-old daughter. I will never understand it, but we really need to take DV more seriously because a lot of people will end up losing their lives, including children. This story is absolutely devastating, and they should be alive with us today. But my heart goes out to that family, and it's thankful that Chelsea was able to escape because he probably would have murdered her too. But I'm glad she's here with us today. But I'm praying for her mother and her little sister because this is just absolutely devastating. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one. And please take care of yourselves, okay?
How did this 5-year-old girl vanish from her home in only 2 minutes? I don't even know how to begin to cover the disappearance of 5-year-old Summer Wells. This case is just filled with discrepancies and contradictions, and a lot of people suspect her parents, so let's cover the facts and make up our own mind. At the time of 5-year-old Summer Wells' disappearance, she lived with her mother, Candace, her father, Don, and her 3 older brothers. Candace's mother, Grandma Candy, also lived on the property in a trailer. The day that Summer vanished, her father had to go to work, and her mother, Candace, took Summer to drop off Grandma Candy at a doctor's appointment. And this is when the contradiction convictions begin. Candace says that 15-year-old family friend Hunter texted her saying she wanted to hang. Her and Summer went over to his house while Grandma Candy was in her doctor's appointment, and then when her doctor's appointment was over, Hunter, Candace, and Summer went to go pick up Grandma Candy. She then says that all of them went to a swimming hole and on the way there picked up some Twisted Teas and some vapes for Candace and Grandma Candy. But 15-year-old Hunter has a different story. He says that Candace actually texted him first to hang out and that Candace gave him some of the alcohol and vapes. Personally, I don't think this is relevant in Summer's disappearance, but I do believe that Hunter's telling the truth and Candace didn't want to look bad, but it does show her willingness to lie to police. We do know that after swimming, they dropped Hunter back off at his house, and then Grandma Candy, Candace, and Summer all went home and then planted some flowers near Grandma Candace's trailer. After planting the flowers, Summer wanted to go inside and play with her 3 older brothers, so Candace says that she watched her walk into the front door and then followed her only 2 minutes later. When Candace got inside, Summer's 3 older brothers were watching TV and said that Summer went downstairs to play, but Summer wasn't downstairs. She wasn't anywhere. She was gone. A large search was done for Summer, and they lived in a very secluded area. They didn't have neighbors the same way that most people have neighbors, but a lady that lived nearby said that the time that Summer disappeared, she heard this really weird scream followed by a door slamming. It was possible she was actually hearing Summer's abduction, if that's what you believe happened. Dogs tracked Summer's scent from the basement door. Remember, she went downstairs to go play the last time she was seen, to the back property where there was woods, through the woods, down a hill, to a back road where the scent went cold. So it's not crazy to assume that somebody parked their car on that back road, kidnapped Summer from the basement, and then drove off with her. I mean, this would explain why her scent went cold on this back road and why that neighbor heard a scream followed by a door slamming. This case is not as simple as that. In part 2, we're going to go over all the reasons that people think that her family is actually responsible for her disappearance.
She underwent 67 exorcisms and didn't survive. 23-year-old Anneliese Michel was from Bavaria, Germany, and her case would eventually inspire the horror movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and her story was far more disturbing. Anneliese was born in 1952 and she grew up in a deeply religious Catholic family. When she was around 16 years old, she experienced her first convulsion. She was eventually diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy and was given medication. But over the next several years, Anneliese started experiencing things that medication couldn't even help. She started to hear voices and claimed that she could see disturbing faces near her. Eventually, Anneliese became convinced that religious objects were affecting her. During a pilgrimage to a religious shrine, she told her mother that she couldn't walk on the ground because it felt like it was burning beneath her feet. Her family started to believe what was happening to Anneliese might not be medical at all. In 1974, a priest named Ernst Alt met with Anneliese. After observing her, he believed that she was possessed, so he asked the church if he was able to do an exorcism on her. Eventually, the permission was granted, and in September of 1975, the first exorcism started. Over the next 10 months, Anneliese underwent 67 exorcism sessions, and some lasted up to 4 hours. And many of these sessions were recorded on cassette tapes. During those exorcisms, Anneliese would scream, growl, speak in different voices, and claim that there was multiple demons inside of her. While everyone around her was focusing on what was happening to her, Anneliese's physical condition was getting dangerously worse. She stopped eating properly and became extremely weak. By June of 1976, she couldn't even stand on her own. Then on July 1st of 1976, Anneliese died in her family's home. At the time of her death, she only weighed 66 pounds, but her death wasn't the end of the story, because authorities believe that Anneliese could have been saved. Her parents and 2 priests who were involved in the exorcisms were charged with negligent homicide. During trial, the recordings were played in court and all 4 were convicted. They received a 6-month prison sentence, but it ended up being suspended. But years later, Anneliese's case became the inspiration for the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Even decades later, people are still disagreeing about what really happened to Anneliese. Was she suffering from a serious medical and psychiatric illness, Or did the people inside of that house witness something that they can't explain?
And the thing is, I'm not exaggerating at all when I say that she held a goodbye party for her boyfriend before ending his life. I mean, it doesn't get any more sick and twisted than that. Today we're talking about Joe Sink. I can almost guarantee you, I would put money on the fact that you will be angry by the time this video is over. Before we get started, let's acknowledge the dog in the room, Belly. She's taking a nap. She does not like to be alone when she's taking a nap, and she doesn't like to be moved. She's just like me. So we're just gonna let her be. Joe Sink was born to parents Maria and Nino. He was the oldest of 2 children. He had a little brother, and the family resided in Newcastle. Super close family. The parents adored their sons, and it was the kind of family that actually loved to spend time together. The 4 of them really treasured each other. Joe was always very outgoing. He had a ton of friends who he loved spending time with. He grew up loving sports. He was just naturally athletic. You know that kind of guy that's just kind of good at everything? That was Joe. He did well in school. He was well liked. He was also pretty smart. He went on to get a degree in engineering, and he graduated in 1994. The following year, in 1995, Joe Sink met his soon-to-be girlfriend, Anu Singh. I think that's how you say her name. It's literally spelled A-N-U. Anu. That makes sense to me. They met when they were out one night. The start to their relationship was immediate. From the moment that they met, they got along like a house on fire. Anu was born in India, but now lived with her siblings and her parents in Newcastle. Anu also had a very outgoing personality, and I guess that you could say she did have a lot going for her on paper, but internally she did have some struggles. It sounded like she struggled pretty badly with her mental health in the past. The 2 of them did long distance for a little bit because Anu was going to school, and they really liked each other, but slowly but surely cracks started to show. Joe's parents were the first to notice how Joe began to change once he was in a relationship with Anu, because Anu was very clingy. She wanted to be with Joe or talk to Joe all the time, but it felt like she wanted to be the only person to be with or talk to Joe. She would interrupt conversations between Joe and his parents and take him away, or she would just call him as he was sitting down to eat dinner with his family, and she would expect him to leave the dinner table to go and talk to her. Joe's mother said, quote, "He wasn't himself anymore. She demanded too much of him," end quote. By 1996, Anu was still completing her studies. She was in law school, and Joe made the move to Canberra to go and live with her. His parents were not happy about that decision, not only because their son would now be 5 hours away, but primarily because they didn't think that being in a relationship with Anu was the right thing for him. You could just tell that their relationship was not healthy. Around this time as well, Anu developed an unhealthy obsession with her self-image. She wasn't eating properly. In fact, she was barely eating. She was struggling with confidence and often talked poorly about herself. She became obsessed with her diet and would spend hours at the gym. She also began complaining about a lot of things health-wise. She was always feeling drained, weak, tired, and she often said that she felt like bugs were crawling underneath her skin. And her personal issues would translate into her relationship through anger and resentment, because she would blame Joe for a lot of her health issues, or she would get mad at him if she was sick and he wasn't. Even though Joe was nothing but kind to her, he always took care of her. He'd always show up and be by her side at her beck and call. But Anu, she was just so angry at the world, and it was kind of obvious that she had something psychologically wrong. Not saying that that's a bad thing. You can get help for that, and that is normal, but she just didn't. I always say how important mental health is, and it is such a serious thing, but you should seek help if you need it. Her mental health was so unstable that it was causing her to see things in a negative light, to see Joe in a negative light, and she built up so much anger towards him that she eventually started talking about the possibility of ending his life. Anu spoke to one of her law school friends. Her name is Madhavi. She confided in her about the idea of ending Joe's life, and it wasn't like she said some quick comment that could easily be disregarded. Not at all. Anu told her friend that not only did she want to end Joe's life, but she also spoke about how she was so smart that she could get away with it because she was in law school. She was obviously intelligent. She said that she would know how to act insane, how to make people believe that she was crazy, so that if she was to get caught, she could manipulate people into really thinking that she was insane. But then she switched her plan. She told her friend that she actually wanted to unalive Joe and then unalive herself. And there was no sugarcoating it. Anu just said plain and simple, "This is what I want to do." Anu's parents soon noticed how off she was acting. They were actually so concerned that they contacted her university themselves and tried to get her admitted into a mental health facility without her consent so that she could get the help that she so clearly needed, but that wasn't successful on their part. Sooner than later, Anu was telling everybody about her plan to end her boyfriend's life, classmates, friends, acquaintances, so many people. She talked about it so openly that she even once asked a classmate for a weapon after telling him what she intended to do, and not one person thought, "You have issues, that is wrong, what is wrong with you?" Not one person, which that in itself is insanity. And let me actually just say, if I have any young viewers, by the way, if anyone tells you that they have plans of ending someone's life, even if you think that it is a joke, go tell someone. Ending someone's life, ending your own life is not a joking matter, and it is something that should be taken seriously. If it is a joke, you would rather be safe than sorry. The classmate that Anu went to speak about a weapon said that he didn't have any weapons, but he did have substances and he could give her said substance because if she or someone took enough of it, it could be lethal. It could end someone's life. So he couldn't give her a weapon because he didn't have one, but he was happy to give her X amount of this substance because that would still do the job. I'm sorry. So Anu and her friend Madhabi went to this guy's house to buy said substance, and they all took the substance to know how to use it. Like, what? I'm being serious. This is what happened. Is that not just the most mental thing that you have ever heard? In October of 1997, Anu went back to that classmate's house to buy $500 worth of that substance. After that, her and Madhavi went to another classmate's house to purchase a different kind of substance, one that could be used to make a person go unconscious. October 20th of 1997, it was a Monday. Anu had decided that that day would be the day that she would unalive her boyfriend Joe and then unalive herself. So what did she do? She held a dinner party. Yeah, she wanted to play host. She held a dinner party that, unbeknownst to Joe, was literally their goodbye party because after that night, they would no longer be alive. Anu and Madhavi invited their friends, classmates, random people to this dinner party, and every single person there knew the purpose of the party. They knew that it was a goodbye party. They knew it was a goodbye party for Joe, and nobody said a thing. Nobody said anything to Joe. I cannot wrap my mind around it. It is the most shocking thing that I've ever heard. People who attended the dinner party said that that night, Anu was very caring and very loving towards Joe, so the people attending the party apparently thought that ending their lives was a joke because Anu was acting so happy that people thought that she wasn't being serious about her intentions. At the end of the night, when everyone was leaving, Madhabi was saying goodbye to everyone and she was saying, bye, thanks for coming. Oh, by the way, this is still happening. Once all of us leave, Anu will be going through with the plan. Yep, okay. See you later. Thanks for coming. Bye. And once everyone left, Anu did attempt to end Joe's life. She crushed some of the substances into his drink. Joe drank it and he did go unconscious. But it didn't go according to plan because the next morning he woke up. He was very out of it and very groggy, but he did wake up. And Anu was like, well, that's unfortunate that I was incapable of ending my sweet boyfriend's life who loves me so much. What should I do? I should try again. Yeah, so that Friday, Anu hosted another goodbye dinner party for her and for Joe. Same deal, everyone was invited back over. They were told that the plan remained the same, that she was going to go through with it tonight. And the people there are like, cool, what's for dinner? That dinner party went on pretty late into the early hours of the next morning. The last guest left at 6 in the morning and Anu again attempted to end Joe's life by crushing the substance, mixing it in his drink, and then injecting him with another substance. And her attempt failed again. That is now 2 failed attempts twice, 2 opportunities that someone could have had to save Joe's life. If someone would have just said something, but nobody did. That same day, Joe was feeling unwell, but the day went on as normal. That night, Anu went over to Madhavi's house. They got in an argument. Anu went home to go see Joe and for the 3rd time did the same thing that she had done twice before. And Joe went unconscious the next morning, the 26th of October, a Saturday. This was around 8 in the morning. Anu wakes up. She drives over to Madhavi's house, picks her up. They go back to Anu's house. Anu shows Madhavi Joe. He was lying on the bed, still breathing, but looking extremely unwell. He was pale, turning blue, but still alive. Anu tells Madhavi that the night prior, her and Joe got in a disagreement and Joe told her that he was going to leave her. Joe did not want to be in this relationship anymore, and in return, Anu put more in his drink to end his life. So both girls are standing there looking at Joe and they decided to go to an ATM to go get cash. Anu ended up driving back to the classmate's house to buy even more of the substance. Meanwhile, Madhavi goes to another classmate's house, filling them in on what's going on. Anu, now back at home with Joe, kind of starts freaking out because Joe is now only slowly breathing about 1 breath every 10 seconds. She freaks out. She calls her friend and basically says that she needs help reviving him. The friend is basically like, I don't want to help you. I can't help you. How about you call the paramedics? And Anu says, I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to call the paramedics. A few minutes later, Anu finally decides to do the right thing and call for help. So she calls 000 and it is the most infuriating call. She has no sense of urgency. She takes forever to give them the address and she starts asking questions that make it sound like she's more concerned about what's going to happen to her rather than Joe. She tells the operator, quote, he's vomiting everywhere, blood stuff. And then she says, is that a bad sign? She gives them the wrong address before finally giving them the correct one, and when paramedics showed up, Joe was in horrible condition. His stomach was bloated, he had vomit all over him, and he was extremely pale. And Anu did tell the paramedics everything. She told them everything that she gave Joe, but she claimed that she only did it because she wanted him to go to sleep so that he wouldn't see her unaliving herself. Anu was hysterical, begging for them to save Joe's life, but it was too late. Joe Sink passed away later that night. Anu was immediately arrested, charged with murder, and she was taken back to the police station. Before hearing about Joe's passing, Joe's mom had a horrible gut feeling that something awful had happened. She tried to call Joe, but as she was calling him, officers knocked on her front door and they said it's about Joe. Before officers said anything else, Joe's mom started crying and screaming, and she said that she knew right then and there that Anu had ended her son's life. She was crying and begging the police, saying, "Please don't say it, please don't tell me, please tell me it's not true." Since then, Joe's mother has said that that day was a nightmare that she never woke up from. An autopsy and a toxicology report was conducted on Joe, and it showed the exact things that his girlfriend Anu fed him to end his life. And as if they needed more evidence, police found Anu's diary, where it once again made it clear that she had full intentions to make this happen, and this was done on purpose. Madhavi was arrested, as she should be. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Both of the girls were going to be tried jointly together in October and November of 1998. However, that was abandoned, and the judge ordered that they should be tried separately in the interest of fairness. Anu's trial began in March of 1999. She pled not guilty by reason of diminished responsibility. Before I read you the verdict, I want to read this quote from a forensic psychiatrist who assessed Anu. The psychiatrist supported her claims of severe mental illness, but made sure to clarify that she did know the difference between right and wrong. Quote, "This was a grossly disordered woman with a mental illness. She was mad, not totally mad. She knew what she was doing up to a point. She knew it was wrong up to a point. She could have controlled herself up to a point, but she wasn't in a normal state of mind." Anu was found not guilty of murder, but she was found guilty of manslaughter. But listen to this. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison with a minimum parole period of 4 years that was backdated to when the crime first happened. So she was eligible for parole in 2 years. 2 years. Joe's mother was hysterical. She said in court, quote, "4 years, is that all my son is worth?" Anu was released on parole in October of 2001 after only 4 years. She was sent back to jail in April of 2004 after breaching her parole conditions. She was re-released on August 5th of 2004. Madhavi also pled not guilty in her trial. She was found not guilty, and that was that. She had no consequences. So, I'm sorry, they planned to end someone's life, premeditated. They had an endless amount of conversations about this plan. They wrote about this plan in a journal. They spoke to anyone and everyone they saw about this plan. And one of them gets 4 years and the other one gets nothing. That is all I have for today's video. This one made me so angry and I won't be able to stop thinking about it for a long time, but let me know if you've heard of this case before. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Joe's story. I hope you guys are all having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
A woman claims she shot her husband in self-defense, but thankfully the investigators were able to find the surveillance footage from inside of her home to tell exactly what happened to her husband. November 12, 2019, Olive Branch, Mississippi. 911 gets a call from a man stating that someone has been shot inside of a residence. Now he's unwilling to give his name or further information. So the police arrive to the address and they're met with a man named Joshua. Now, Joshua claims that his mother and stepfather live at the residence, which is Felicia Barden and his stepfather, Willie. And he claims that his mother shot Willie in self-defense. So when the police enter the home, they find Felicia. She's crying and she's frantic and she has a big gash on her forehead. Then they find Willie in the bathroom. He's face down and he's been shot in the chest. Now, is this possible that this happened during a domestic violence incident? So a little background on Willie. He came from a very large family in Arkansas. He has 7 brothers and 6 sisters. So there's 14 siblings in total. And you know, he went to college, but he realized it wasn't for him. So he decided to work for a cookware company. And that's where he met his first wife, Cassandra, and they had 2 children together. But then he decided he wanted to take a different career path. And in the 2000s, he became a firefighter. Willie and Cassandra end up getting divorced, and then a short time later, Willie meets Felicia. She's been divorced, she's a single mother, and she works for the IRS. They dated for about 7 years until they got married in 2012, and then they moved to Olive Branch, Mississippi to have their blended family in a big home. So they asked Joshua if he knows where the firearm is. He says, yeah, it's in the kitchen drawer. takes the police right to it. So him and his mother, Felicia, were brought down to the station for a more formal interview, but Felicia completely shuts down, doesn't say a word, won't explain how she got the injury to her forehead. But the detective is wondering, it looks like she probably did this to herself because the wound is just straight up and down. Even though Felicia is not talking, Joshua decides to tell his side of the story. So he claims he was at work at the Circle K when he received a call from his mother that there was an emergency at home. So he immediately rushes home as fast as he can. His mother is frantic. She just says that she shot Willie in self-defense, and he does admit that he hid the firearm for her. So the investigators are processing the scene. Willie is found in the bathroom face down with a gunshot wound to his chest. There's a shell casing near his body, along with sleeping pills, and they also find an open razor blade. Possibly that is how Felicia had made that injury to her forehead. Now inside their home, they had security cameras all around the house. So they eventually go to find where the DVR is in the closet, but it turns out that the wires are there, but the actual DVR box is missing. So they do end up finding it in the trash can. So they go back and speak with Joshua, and he does admit that his mom is very difficult to get along with. Now, his mom, Felicia, and Willie would fight a lot, but he never saw Willie put his hands on his mother. Now, a week before this incident, Felicia had called her son Joshua, claiming that she believes that Willie is trying to poison her by putting sleeping pills in her food because she's been sleepy a lot more. Joshua admits that he did not get along with his stepfather Willie, and at one point he ended up putting a firearm to his head, claiming that he didn't like Joshua's thuggish demeanor. But he does also admit that he was the one that tried to get rid of that DVR for his mom. But Willie's son has a different story than Joshua. He claims that Joshua actually had a plate in his hand and was planning on throwing it at Willie in the face. But that's when Willie retrieved his firearm. He didn't point it at him, he just kind of held it down and said, "You're not going to attack me in my own house." So they did a background on Felicia and Willie, and back in 2009, they both had called 911 on each other, but no one was arrested. And Felicia also called her brother, claiming that she thought that Willie was trying to poison her. So he ends up confronting Willie, and he says, "No, there is nothing going on, and we will all work this out." And he kind of just left it there. Now, Willie's coworkers had nothing bad to say about him. He was a good employee. He was always on time. He was very nice to everybody. Now, Felicia, on the other hand, her coworkers had said that she was very difficult to get along with, and she was actually suspended from her job. It appeared that she was trying to control Willie, trying to distance himself from his own family, even his own kids, and she just wanted to control every aspect of his life. But then it started to get really bad when Joshua ended up moving in because Willie kept his house completely clean, and Joshua was very messy, and he was always smelling like marijuana. And just a few weeks before Willie's passing, he was planning on divorcing Felicia, and she knew about this. So thankfully, the investigators were able to get past the password for the DVR of the surveillance video and see what exactly had happened. So on the security camera, we see Felicia. She's walking down the hall from the master bedroom, and she's going to the garage. Then she comes back in, very calm, and she's carrying a firearm in her hand. She doesn't look scared. She doesn't look like she's in distress, and there is no injury to her forehead. So it appeared at this point that Willie was getting ready for work and was about to take a shower. So he goes into the bathroom, then Felicia comes in, so he has nowhere to escape, and then she fires one time into his chest. Then she goes into the living room, and it looks like she's trying to hide the firearm in the couch cushion. Then she goes back to the master bedroom for about 3 minutes, then comes back out to the couch, possibly to get that firearm to move it again, or possibly something else. Then we see her go upstairs, and then the video goes blank. Probably she's disconnecting the DVR. And then also on Felicia's phone, she had searched how to get away with murder, and they also found a text that she had saved where it looked like she was planning to take her own life. But it appeared that she had changed her mind, and she realized she had to get rid of all of the evidence, but obviously she didn't do it very well. Felicia was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and Joshua was charged with accessory after the fact. But he did agree to testify against his mother, and they decided to drop the charges against him. Now, Felicia was still refusing to talk to anybody, even her defense lawyer. So her defense attorney, his hands are tied. There's no defense. She won't even take the stand in her own defense. She won't say a word. So the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And to this day, Joshua has had no contact with his mother. Now, it's unclear what the exact motive was because Felicia refused to talk to the police, even her defense attorney. But most likely the reason is because Willie had said he's probably wanting to divorce her and she just couldn't go through another divorce, and she really relied on Willie. Now, it's very possible her initial plan was to murder Willie, maybe take her own life, but then she started to have second thoughts and wasn't going to go through with it. And now she's thinking, crap, I've got to get rid of this evidence because I literally just murdered him in cold blood. So that's why she calls her son in a panic. And then he really thought it was just self-defense. He had no idea what was going on. He was not there at the time of the murder. So he was just going by what his mom said. And it's very plausible. But thankfully, they did find that DVR because if that was long gone, this probably would have been a self-defense incident. But because they found it, you could see on the security camera, she's very calm, going to get that firearm. She knew exactly what she was doing and murdered Willie in cold blood for absolutely no reason. My heart goes out to him and especially all of his siblings, all of his 13 siblings that he has. But this did not have to happen to him. It's just cold-blooded, and she will spend the rest of her life in prison. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. Love you all. We'll see you in the next one. And please take care of yourselves.